Hi, I'm Mary Jo. This is Art with Me. We've been doing successful programs with the Amherst Library, and we're continuing, and I'm adding some new things to the watercolor pencils. I got you some examples today of things you can do if you don't draw, which is what I specialize in, because not everybody is going to sit down and take the pencils and go, oh, this is my favorite thing. Watercolor pencils, water soluble, that's paint in a pencil form. All you do is add water and you can run the paint on the paper. When you sharpen these, you can use just a little tiny pencil sharpener like this. And what I want to emphasize is you don't have to come to a really sharp point. You can stop a little bit because you're not going to be using this. It will tear the paper. You're going to be using the side of this to color. That's just a little tip. That's why I meant the pencil shavings here. I don't want you to overdo it. And please, if they get wet or damp, don't try and sharpen the pencil, because it'll just kind of get icky and fall apart, and then you'll be grinding and grinding and grinding, and you'll have a little stub like this. So, I'm going to start out with butterflies. There's a bunch of ways to do butterflies, and if you don't draw, it doesn't matter. If your right hand can't draw what the left hand is thinking, it's okay. Because what you do is you get rubber stamps of butterflies. You can ink them with the watercolor pencil, and then you can stamp your page. What's good about this then is that you can color in the butterflies. You can use it dry or wet, it doesn't matter. So you can use this as with crayons. You could use this the same way as if you're using colored pencils. You don't have to use the water if you don't want to. It's just a dry application. But it's fun because you can fill in the sections. So if I wanted to add different colors in here, I can just do it dry, and look how cool it is. Now, if I wanted to use water with this, you only want to go in one direction. Then you wipe off the excess paint. If you scrub the brush back and forth, you would lose the definition of color. I have 3 different colors coming up here, and you want to keep that integrity. So I'm dipping and I'm getting that little trickle of water off. I had someone that was dabbing the paper. That doesn't work because the integrity of the paper goes quickly. I always start at the outside edge and I push towards the center. That way I can pick up the excess paint, and then I wipe it off into my paper towel. If you have any areas that you want to enhance a little bit more. So that's half a flutterby. And I think it turns out pretty good. Now, paper's wet. So if you wanted to fix any of these lines, if they turned out a little bit lighter, lighter than what you wanted, now would be the time that you would get that dark blue tone in and it would turn out very, very nice. So that's what your butterfly will start to look like. Now, if you wanted to change your mind, at this point, you could add a brighter tone of yellow, and it changes the whole mood. You don't add more water to it. You have to do this dry. Because if you added water to it, you're going to lose your colors, and the pillows on the surface of the paper will start to break down and the paper will tear. So if you didn't use anything, you could just make a plain yellow butterfly without water, dry. Just make sure that you kind of use circular motions when you're putting it in, because you have those pillows on the surface of the paper, and you kind of have to push, because this is dry paint, you have to push into those pillows so you don't have a bunch of white dots at the top of the pillows. When you add the water, the paper relaxes and those pillows flatten. But when you're doing it like this, so that's two different ways of doing that butterfly. Now, if you decided that you wanted to put other colors in, look how easy this is. You just take the other color, and because you didn't add any water, it's not changing the paper. Look how cool that is. You change the whole look of the butterfly in just an instant. But if you had added water and keep adding water, it would be a pastel. You wouldn't have the brightness. You wouldn't have the texture. And it would start to look muddy. And I know a lot of people have trouble with muddy paint, and that's because you mix it with the water. You can brighten up the other side, certainly. I'm adding orange here. Remember how many times I've gone over this butterfly and changed it. But because I haven't added a lot of water, look how cool that is. Then I can pull this blue in, and because there's no water, it's not going to mix with the yellow. You're going to get the blue. And even though you did an underpainting here, you can make the other side sort of kind of match. I wanted you to see how you can fix things, how you can work with this. I love watercolor pencils because they're so versatile. But see how that matches pretty much? You started out with yellow. Now, if I got really, really dissatisfied because I didn't add the water, I can erase some of this. I like the pinky eraser. This eraser is not doing so hot, but you get the gist of it. You can take some of that bright color off if you want. You can change your mind to a point, and your paper's not tearing is the point of this, because you didn't compromise the cotton fiber on that paper. so you can adjust a little bit. I like the pinky erasers. Some of the erasers don't work, and the one that doesn't work at all on this is the gummy ones that architects use. It's a gummy kind of a thing. It doesn't do this justice. So there's a pink pearl brand, and that's what you want. Now watch how this cleans up. It doesn't leave any residue. It's a little bit harder. Look how that brightens it up. So your equipment makes a big difference on what you use. If you use the wrong stuff, you're not going to have a quality product. So kind of pay attention. It's not any little thing will do. It's specific brands of things that'll work for you. Now the other thing I wanted to show you before we get into the oil pastels is what they call a positive negative. If you don't draw, you can cut out a butterfly. You can cut out of a magazine. It gives you the color, it gives you the shape. You can use it on the paper. And you can get your background in. The background's really important. It's very hard if you have a butterfly like this to get the background in without compromising the butterfly. A lot of people have trouble with backgrounds. This is a way to get around that. You take a picture you like, cut it out, and instead of tracing it on the paper, you take a sponge, dampen it. You wring it out so there's no water coming out of it. It's just damp. Then, I have all the colors that I'm going to use already picked out, and I have them laid out on my table. And see how the paint goes on that sponge? Remember, this is watercolor paint in a pencil form, so it goes on the sponge. This isn't drippy wet, and I'm not raking the sponge over the paper. I don't want to compromise the paper. I just want to get background in. This is so cool. You got a butterfly and you didn't do anything much at all. If you would have pulled it, you would have, this is just regular magazine. You would have ripped this apart. And you don't want to soak it in case you want to use it again. Maybe you want another butterfly down here. But you have this in front of you to show you what the butterfly looks like. So you just do some simple lines here. And I think he's got a couple little spots. That you can see that you didn't draw anything. You copied this. So you really don't have to, if your hand tremors a little bit, you can use the pencils. You can do this. You don't have to be perfect. If you've had a stroke, this is really good therapy. Even if you have to have somebody cut this out for you, lay it down. But it's just an up and down motion with the sponge around it. Then, what I did is I took my watercolor pencil and I colored in the butterfly, just like I did over here. dry. Okay, if you're right-handed and you broke your hand, you could use your left hand. All you have to do is push the pencil on the paper. It's soft enough that the color will come on. I want you to be able to do art no matter what. And you've seen pictures of people that take paintbrushes in their teeth if they've had a stroke. It keeps the mind going. You don't want your mind to settle down to a ho-hum existence. It's not good for you. This is awesome. So I don't want this to get muddy. I'm using strokes, and I can use my sponge instead of a paper towel then to take off the excess paint if you want. There's a butterfly with the background that you didn't draw. You paint it, and it's satisfying. You cut out. You can even use stencils if you wanted to, and put the butterfly on. But it's different with a stencil. This is called positive negative. With the stencil, you actually put the butterfly on, and the background is covered up. This way here, you get the background on too. So you get a different look, but I think this is fun. If you were doing figures and you didn't know how to draw a figure, go into a magazine and cut out the figure. You can put the figure down on the paper just like you did the butterfly, put the paint around, and voila. You've got a figure that you didn't have to worry about the proportion if the head and the shoulders and the hips and feet were right. It's already from the magazine. It's a way to get you to concentrate and relieve your brain of tension and play at the same time and have fun without worrying about perspective and all the ins and outs of being an artist. This is being creative and promoting a healthy brain. So we're going into part 2 now of this. And part 2 is going to bring in the oil pastels. Cray is my favorite oil pastel. There are others on the market. I grew up with these. I had these in grade school. Instead of crayons, we had Cray that we used. But what I wanted to show you is this paint, the watercolor paint, in the pencil form, makes it easier to apply the Cray to the paper. This is watercolor paper. You don't want to be changing papers all the time. You have one tablet of paper, you want to be able to use it for everything. And this is a cool way to do it. I'm going to do the background on this. And this is my spattering. And I want to get around the flower, so I'm not going to do the flower first. In case I spritz or splatter on the flower, I'd be able to correct right away with clear water. Now the spattering, when you do it, is you have a wet brush and you have a downstroke towards the paper, and it's very quick, and you're spattering the paint down. Now you can direct it any way you want to. If you get your spatter on something you don't want, just take clear water really quick and it comes right off. Because the paper hasn't really soaked it up. So if I want, before the paint has dried, I can get more solid background just by taking a damp brush. I'm not drippy wet. You see how many times I go into the water? Not often at all. And then I always take off the excess. But here, I'm running my paintbrush through the spatter, and I'm blending them. I don't blend all of it out because I like that look. But you're getting a nice texture in the background. And you can add another color onto it. See, I didn't put any paint on my brush, if you noticed. I'm using the spatters that make little bubbles of paint on the page. And I'm just taking water and blending that out. To me, it's always harder to do a background after I have my masterpiece, my flowers done. Because I'm going to have so many oops moments. And you don't want to keep tearing up your paper. So it's easier, in my mind, to do the background this way. That way you can add different colors. If I wanted to add a blue in here, I could even add blue. I can leave it spattered. You just got to keep the paint a little bit loose. And remember, after I add water to this paintbrush, I want to dry it off right away so it doesn't keep melting. This whole stick will melt if you leave it near water. Then you have nothing. So I put some blue paint here, but I don't want to leave it alone. I want to bring some down to the opposite corner so you have some symmetry. You want to repeat colors in different areas of your painting. You're telling a story and you want some continuity. So, I'm not going to do a lot of detail with this. I'm going to add some pink to this. Because I'm copying the colors in this picture. And it's a light pink. They're cosmos flowers. And I paint out from the center this time. I pull away. A lot of times I paint towards the center, but with these flowers, I'm going to pull away. Because it's got a dark center and lighter outer petals. Now, I put my paint on with a spatter. You don't have to. You can load your brush up with wet paint and paint like a regular paintbrush, instead of putting it on dry and then wetting it on the paper. There's very many ways to use these paints effectively. You don't want to use the paint by pressing down heavily on wet paper. You might tear the paper. You can't blend the paint. It's better if you start out light and then go a little bit darker. You can always go darker, but you can't always go lighter. It's a rule of thumb. Now, this one I'm playing with the detail. You can do it this way, put dark down, and then pull it into the center. You can take from the center, pull out. Leave your highlights in there. Don't paint the whole petal solid. You want to have some darks and lights in there, some variation of color. And I squiggle my brush around because of those pillows in the paper. I want to mush that paint in there in the gentlest way possible. Now, because in watercolor you don't have white, you can use oil pastel. This will cream up your color. But remember, you can't paint over this. This is oil now. This is your final ta-da. So I have painted that petal, which allows the oil pastel to run smoothly across the paper. So I've creamed that up. You can see the difference. From there on in, you can only use the oil pastel. Oil and water don't mix. It's true in the art world. Say I wanted to brighten up the center now. I'm using the oil pastel. Now, if you want to lift the oil pastel up, you can use your fingernail or a sharp object, and you can make grooves, or you can remove it if you want by scraping it off. You can change the color. You can do anything you want to this now. You have the white oil pastel down, and it's a blending medium now. So you can blend the oil pastel because you've got this floating oil base, which is the white. And then you can float the color on that. Your background is done. You don't worry about the watercolor anymore. You can't use it once you started the oil pastel. Everything from this point on will be done with the oil pastel stick. If you want to change it, make it darker, put highlights in, whatever you do will be done . I have a dark green on here. If I didn't want it that dark, all I have to do is take the white oil pastel and put it over as a layer. And it mutes it right down. It turned into like a gray color. I took that dark green right off. Then, if I wanted some of that dark green to show, I can scrape off some of that white, and the dark green magically appears underneath it. So you change the color again. So this keeps morphing all the time. So if you change your mind, this is a good medium because you can keep playing with this. Now I'll do it again. This is watercolor because I don't have anything on this. I'm using the side. To put some paint on here. Now I don't have any oil pastel on this at all. I'm not mixing the mediums together at this point. All I'm doing is filling in those pillows with paint. You could leave it a watercolor painting, but this lesson is to show you there are other ways to go. That's why I added the oil pastel. There isn't any have-tos in this. You don't have to do it one way, you don't have to do it the other, but it's a fun way of utilizing some things that are in your art box that you go, I wonder what this does, or I've never used this before. So there's the watercolor one. Now this one is kind of blonde. And in the picture here, they're dark. So the watercolor isn't going to work for that one. So you go into your oil pastels, and that's going to fix it up immediately. And this is gooey and soft, like butter. And yes, it's gonna get messy, so please put a table covering down. So I'm going to go back in with the oil pastel. I'm done with my watercolor pencils for right now. We're to the point here where we're just going to use the oil pastels. We're not going to use anything else. If you want to lighten something, this is great because you can use the white. The white will blend and the white will lighten. So you can put highlights in, you can fix things. With the watercolor, you're limited because you can only use a Chinese white legitimately with watercolor for a white. Or a white ink. But this is more freedom for expression than you've had before, which is plain watercolor. The oil pastel is blendable with your finger or a Q-tip, sponge, cotton swab. You can try different sources of different things to get different textures. It's more versatile than other things are. Then you can get fanciful with your flowers. You don't have to follow what's in the book. I'm getting a little out of the box, which I normally do. And I have a little bit of fun with it. So we're getting to the end. You can go back with a darker color and add some definition. You can put other colors in here. But you can see how well the background works because you don't have to go in and try and go between petals. There you go. All done. Thank you for watching. See you again soon.